The day after my wife and I signed the divorce papers, I felt like a ghost moving through my own life. Everything was numb, unreal. For 4 years, I had imagined that if we ever reached this point, I would feel rage or devastation. But instead, I felt hollow, like the shell of a man who had lost something he couldn't even name. I packed a small bag, left the apartment we once shared, and drove aimlessly until the city lights blurred into a haze. Eventually, I pulled into a rundown motel on the edge of town, the kind of place no one would think to look for me. It was cheap, unremarkable, and exactly what I needed: anonymity. I thought all I wanted was silence and 4 walls to contain my grief. But when I walked up to the reception desk, something unexpected happened. The receptionist, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a face marked by her own quiet sadness, looked at me as if she could see straight through my chest. She didn't ask unnecessary questions. She didn't comment on the way my hands trembled as I fumbled with my wallet. Instead, she leaned forward slightly and, in a voice softer than a whisper, said, "Rough night?" Such a simple question, yet it hit me like a thunderbolt. My throat tightened. I nodded, unable to speak. She slid the room key across the counter and added, "Sometimes it helps to talk. The walls in these rooms are thin, but my ears are better than most." It wasn't pity in her voice, it was recognition. As if she knew exactly what had dragged me there. I carried my bag to the room, the faded carpet crunching under my boots. But her words echoed in my head, "Sometimes it helps to talk." I hadn't talked to anyone about the divorce. Not my family, not my friends. They all had their own versions of what happened, their judgments about who was right and who was wrong. But no one had asked me how it felt. Inside the motel room, the silence was suffocating. The peeling wallpaper, the buzzing light, the thin blanket, all of it mirrored the emptiness inside me. I sat on the edge of the bed and tried to cry, but no tears came. Only a dull ache in my chest. I thought about my ex-wife, about the years we spent together, and wondered when love had turned into resentment, when laughter had turned into silence. After what felt like hours of staring at the ceiling, I found myself wandering back down to the reception desk. She was still there, reading a paperback novel. She looked up, gave a faint smile, and gestured to the empty chair beside her. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked. I shook my head. For a moment, I hesitated. Then, finally, I said the words I had been choking on. "We signed the papers yesterday. My wife and I, it's over." She closed her book slowly, as if preparing to absorb the weight of my confession. "That's a heavy thing," she said softly. "But it's not the end of you." Her words startled me. Not the end of me. It felt like it was. I told her everything: the fights, the betrayal, the long nights of silence where we pretended things were fine. How she stopped looking at me the way she once did. How I ended up sleeping on the couch. How we became strangers living under the same roof. The receptionist listened quietly, never interrupting. Just nodding now and then. When I finally stopped, she said, "You're grieving, not her. What you lost inside yourself." That struck harder than anything. She was right. I wasn't just mourning the marriage. I was mourning the version of me that believed in it. I asked her how she knew. Her eyes flickered with something distant, something painful. "Because I've been there," she admitted. She told me about her own failed marriage, how her husband had left her years ago for someone younger, how she had been working nights at the motel ever since. "At first, I thought I was dying," she said. "But really, I was being reborn. Pain doesn't kill us. It reshapes us." She poured herself a cup of coffee and slid one across to me. "It'll taste terrible," she warned with a chuckle. "But sometimes bitterness is what keeps you awake." We sat there in that dimly lit lobby, 2 strangers bound by wounds. And for the first time since the divorce, I didn't feel completely alone. She spoke about forgiveness. Not for my ex-wife, but for myself. "You did the best you could with what you knew then," she told me. "Don't carry her mistakes on your shoulders." I sipped the bitter coffee, and it tasted like medicine I didn't know I needed. I realized I had been clinging to anger, shame, and regret like armor, but all it had done was weigh me down. When dawn crept through the dirty motel windows, I was still sitting in that lobby. Still talking. Still listening. The receptionist had become something I never expected, a witness to my pain, a stranger who gave me more comfort than anyone else had in months. Before I returned to my room, she said quietly, "The hardest part is over. You survived the ending. Now you get to decide the beginning." Her words followed me back, echoing as I finally lay down and, for the first time in weeks, slept without nightmares. The next morning, when I checked out, she smiled at me in a way that felt like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. "Take care of yourself," she said. "And remember, you're not broken, just rebuilding." I didn't know if I'd ever see her again, but I carried those words with me like a lifeline. As I drove away from that cheap motel, I realized something had shifted. The divorce wasn't the end of my story. It was just the end of a chapter. And maybe, just maybe, the next one could be better. Looking back, I'll always remember that night. Not because of the peeling wallpaper or the creaky bed, but because of the receptionist who quietly reminded me of something I had forgotten. Endings don't define us. Choices do. And in that fragile space between despair and hope, she handed me the courage to start again.